Hello.
Just I don't know if anybody's ever seen the Burns and Allen show. Anybody know what that is? The Burns and Allen show. George Burns was a Jewish comedian that lived to be 105, I think. He had a wife named Gracie, and Gracie was kind of an airhead, and so they had a very successful television show that ran for probably maybe a decade, maybe less. And then Gracie died, and George Burns never remarried, and he said that the only wife he knew was Gracie, and he wouldn't do any kind of television, but he still continued to do stand up. So on every show, when the show would end, he'd say, "Okay, say goodnight, Gracie," and she'd say, "Good night, Gracie." So my wife kind of treats me like I'm Gracie, you know. Are you comfortable?
Yeah.
So make sure you're comfortable.
Yeah, because you got a baby.
How do you know?
I'm so excited.
You announced it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool.
I gotta like I gotta wheel her around on a what do you call those? What do they call those things?
Wheelchair?
No, the hand truck. God forbid wheelchair. The hand truck. She wants to move from place to place. I stuff the hand truck underneath her feet, and I move her to a different place.
Oh, cute.
Probably the most adorable preggers I've ever seen in my life. Maybe because she's my girl. So anyway, enough about us. We have an interesting piece of information here.
Tons of
Look,
interesting things.
oh, look, Kels came up. I just want you to know that we do this class because I wanted people of all walks of life and faiths to know that the Bible is not some religious text written by people who have an agenda to control or make God into some angry dude in the sky. We wanted to help you understand that it's really, as we use it, as my community uses a guideline for weekly understanding of how to maneuver and move forward. Um, I don't think I've ever shared. Did I share the pharmacy incident?
A few classes perhaps back.
Mm. So it's such an incredible text that always applies to the moment, and you can use it in every aspect of your reality. I think I just asked my wife. I remember mentioning that I had to help a friend who owned a bunch of pharmacies in New York, and I had to go and talk to these people who were suing her, and she was not well, and and at some point I was like, there's really no legal way to tell them to stop suing her or to pay her. And I was pretty frustrated. I was sitting in my car in New York City. I called my wife, or she called me. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm sitting here eating a dry bagel, and I really don't know how to handle this other than just to tell him, I'm involved now. You got to pay me. I'm not going away. So, so she said, well, that's may or may not be legal, but people love you for who you are and not who you were. So this week's portion of the Bible is where God tells Moses not to touch the rock, meaning not to, well, not to touch the rock, meaning he can get water from a stone without touching it. He can speak to it. There are two aspects of this portion that are this portion of the Bible that are very important. One is the fact that there's no need to engage it physically. And two is not to go back to the way you think things work for you. You can actually use your ability to effectively co create and get the same result. And so I sat in the car, I kind of huffed and puffed, but I said, okay, I'm not going to threaten. So I went to the pharmacy, and the guy walks out, and he's a Bukharian guy. He's aggressive. I know he carries a pistol. And he walks out with his wife, and I walk over and I said, "Listen, how you doing?" He was Len. He said, "Len, you remember me?" I said, "No." He said, "No. Years ago, when my mother was sick, you came to the hospital to ICU, and she got better. By the way, why are you here?" So I told him, I said, "Look, I know you're suing your partner. Can we come back to the table and negotiate a fair sale?" I said, "Of course, why not?" And that was that. So not only was my wife right, but the portion of the Bible that it served me not to go backwards. It served me not to engage physically. It served me not to um, address a situation in the way that I was used to addressing. And it served me to be different and open. And the moment I opened my heart to a new possibility, then the outcome became available for me, which resolved my attachment to conflict. I'm not conflicted at all. But that's how it works. So the reason we read this portion, and I really always wanted to share this with people, that are secular and maybe didn't read the Bible or what the Christian world calls the Old Testament. And I thought, wow, what an incredible guideline. People are always looking for direction and have no one to ask. And I've never heard any concrete explanation from any of these wellness people. They always have, everybody's got the secret or some other nonsense that they're offering. I thought this was right in line for people who are becoming realized and want to use a manual which was not written by people, that is impenetrable spiritually, consciously, and emotionally, and can give a kind of a moral support. Because remember, all of us, regardless of what religion we are, we all refer to what we were raised with, to our foundation. And the foundation comes from a text. Well, let's say, my parents raised me in the Soviet Union. So there's no real morality. We didn't grow up with morality. It came, the Soviet party keeps you in check. You don't show up at school, they send for your parents. So the parents pay the price. But once you come into the United States and you don't have a religion and you identify as something, but you're really not that, now you need a moral compass. How do I conduct myself? Is this correct or is that correct? How do I treat money? Everything is in the Bible, everything. And so that's what we draw from. In our lives, the way we interact with the outside world, we draw from the foundation that has been installed as a structure. Some people choose psychology, which is a complete waste of time. Some people choose psychotherapy, which is another complete waste of time. And why? Because it's diagnostic in nature and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they insinuate that they may or may not know how something is going to affect you, what your process is going to be like, and its outcome, which is not true. The Bible insinuates there are unlimited possibilities and that you're in charge of yourself.
We see it clearly when God pulls Abraham out of the tent and shows him that he's not limited by the stars. He was a master astrologer, and he says, well, my life path based on the stars is that I will never have kids. And God told him, with me, you're above the stars. You look at the stars from above, not up to the stars. And so you're not defined by them.
My wife has tuberculosis. So if we go if we go into this moment, like I think we addressed this in the last class about being beyond the stars. Astrology is magical. I mean, really, I love it. It's really my dear friend Rex. I'm sure those of you that know me, I'm sure some of you have called Rex over the years, and if you went to Taos, New Mexico on retreat, you know Rex. I know Rex since 2004, and he's kind of guided me and giving me emotional and psychological relief and support for 22 years, 24 years. Anyway, the truth is that the stars didn't create us and they don't define us. Yes, we're Pisces with 7 planets in Aries and the moon in Taurus, but that only means that defines my potential. For those of you that studied morphology, there's a potential in the profile and the possibility, the expression of the soul's intent in the front of the face. But that's all correctable and changeable. If you spend your life looking at people's faces, then you become the diagnoser of people instead of seeing them as God.
I was gonna say it's kind of the same as diagnosing, like
Yes.
even astrology. It limits your possibilities, but when you have a relationship with God and you allow yourself to really be in it, then you understand that with God there's unlimited possibilities, and you don't have to relegate yourself to diagnosis or to the stars or to this one story or that one story or who's going to win which election. It really doesn't matter.
So what matters is if you get it, if you understand what it means to be realized and how to use the Bible as a guideline, then you understand that once you subscribe to a system, let's say astrology, which is magical and is in the Bible and it's incredible, it really is a world right above us. But once you subscribe to it and it becomes your complete guideline, then you're doomed to live within the confines of its limitation. So when Mercury's in retrograde for 40 days, you should sit home. Is that a reality? No. It's not a reality, because if you have a ritual life and you really live based on your understanding, a realized understanding of the Bible, then you're connected to a world that's beyond the stars, that created the stars.
Not only that, the Bible's constantly pushing us to look forward, to not look back. And we see it clearly in
We're kind of racing
this
through these
story.
last two portions,
Well,
right?
we there's so much to talk in all of these weekly stories that last week there was a really important portion where, remember, we were talking about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed because there was no order and no boundaries, and God wanted to destroy it. And so Abraham went in and he convinced some people to leave, the righteous ones. And amongst these righteous ones were Lot's family. And so an angel came down and told them, okay, leave, but don't look back.
So we could look at it in today's world.
Wait,
right?
well, what happened?
Well, she turned back.
So Lot's wife, they left, and Lot's wife looked back. And what happened to her was she turned into a pillar of salt.
Right.
And this is pretty significant.
Wait, so according to Jerry Epstein, who's Uncle's teacher, he wrote a wonderful book called Healing into Immortality, where he talks about Lot and his wife and the idea of scleroting from within. But what he doesn't talk about is how that story is applicable in our daily lives. When we replay moments of the past in our mind's eye, we're really not present to receive, whether it's the past or the future or some happenstance that may or may not have happened to us. If you insinuate that something happened to you and you keep replaying it in your mind's eye, you're really not where you are. You're in that moment. And so to go back to what Nikki started with was the idea of that God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. No, they destroyed themselves. God is not a destructive force, an angry guy in the sky. It's a benevolent being that constantly creates. And it doesn't judge us for our nonsense. And this whole idea of judgment, which didn't come from, I don't think it came from the original version, but if you think about it, to insinuate that God judges, it insinuates that he.
And based on that, we wouldn't exist.
Wait, so look. So I just want to finish. If you look at people and how they conduct themselves, right? I always bring up this guy because he's famous and everyone knew him. John Gotti, who was a mafia member in the Gambino family in New York City, he made billions. The uh, Nazi guys that killed so many people, they ended up in Argentina. Some of them lived to be 93, 95 years old, right? So if God judged, they'd be destroyed, right? So there is no judgment. It's kind of nonsensical, kind of simplistic way to look at a benevolent being that creates everything, and all it does is create through us. So if you insinuate that, well, what happened to these people? They imploded. Why? Because John Gotti took lives. He assumed the role of God. So it's not as if he was judged by some being outside of himself. He severed his connection because he assumed the role of God. And interestingly enough, when he was put in Marion, Illinois, which is a underground prison, he died of throat cancer. His best friend testified for 200 days, Sammy the Bull. He testified that he made him kill all these people, which wasn't true. John never said a word. He died of throat cancer from all the things he didn't say, which means he judged himself. He was completely destroyed by the betrayal of his best friend. He severed his connection a long time ago when he was left to himself. In isolation, he developed his disconnect, caused his issue. So it's we who do it to ourselves. It's not some guy in the sky with a beard or blonde hair and blue eyes. None of that's true.
So what if someone said that perhaps the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah happened because God pulled its energetic sustaining force from the place?
So they had no relationship with a conscious understanding. All they were, like in today's world, what they call the elites, right? The elites, like what's this quack from California, the Newsom, was our president, Newsom. So he does what he wants. Towns burn down. He lets homeless people be there. He doesn't care anything about California. He doesn't care about the state. He's realized, he understands that he has nobody to answer to, that the little people will still deal and go to work and pay their taxes. And this is what Sodom and Gomorrah was potentially like. People were fully realized. They understood the power of deliberate intent. They did what they wanted, when they wanted. They crossed all kinds of lines. And so when you live within the confines of that understanding and you don't have a morality, then you'll say, well, then there is judgment, because who's judging that there's morality? No. In order to sustain yourself in the human experience and be effective in co-creating, you have to confine yourself based on the texture of the energetic force that has a conscious understanding. I don't know if anybody understands that. So the unseen world that supplies the soul with energy and sustains us and gives us the ability to effectively co-create, it has a conscious boundary.
Sorry.
So as long as you can pull yourself out of, I don't know, should I give them the example last week? I think it was remarkable last week. I just keep it PG. So we had an incident that was, yeah, we did. It was just,
but some people weren't here.
Totally incredible. It was totally to keep us in line. It's not as if some force kept us in line. We signed some deals, and we made a few dollars. So I decided, of course, let's go to northern Florida and stay at the Four Seasons. But we didn't make arrangements to be in a place that would be correct for what we observe. So we have a ritual as modern Orthodox Jews. We observe Shabbat, which, when we're here, we go to synagogue in the morning, and we don't cook, we don't exchange money, we don't drive, we don't talk on the phone. We really collect ourselves, but not more than that. We go to synagogue and we pray till about.
It was also last minute. We chose it last minute, so we didn't have time to accommodate for all these things and plan ahead. We just said, let's go.
So we were about to make reservations. All of a sudden, and we went through the plan in our minds, discussed it, and then all of a sudden we get a call. I get a call from the client that her son, who's unwilling to also, interesting, who's not willing to immerse himself in observance all the way, he immerses himself in observance conveniently. He called his mother and said, yank the retainer, I'm not interested in moving forward.
It's too fast.
No? It's too fast. So we basically, as soon as we deviated, we got a response. That's how fast it is. That's how fast, that's how conscious the line is. Meaning, when you live within the confines of a conscious reality, you align yourself to the creative energy that helps you effectively create what you desire and what you pursue. The power of deliberate intent becomes very effective. When you're not in the alignment or you step out of alignment, all of a sudden you encounter physical obstacles that are just a reality of the physical human experience. It's not as if it's a punishment. It's not as if the guy in the sky said, oh, they're not going to do Shabbat, so let's punish them. No. The flow, financial flow, came as a result of being in alignment. The moment we deviated without consideration that that conscious way of being is an absolute structure that keeps us, all of a sudden, the story changed. And the story changed to accommodate us so that we can learn from it. In other words, the young man engaged me in a endeavor and then backed out, which is kind of like the same action I was taking in terms of my observance. So it was negotiable. You understand? So I'm instantly having to see my own actions. I was like, no, I'm good. As soon as they cancel, I was like, okay, I apologize. Look, I wasn't talking to the guy in the sky. But the truth is, when you deviate, there's a price to pay.
You're the one that deviates, not God as an energetic force.
Right.
It's us.
Right. It never deviates from us. And regardless of how we think of ourselves, no matter how we bash ourselves or what decisions we make, it doesn't destroy us.
It doesn't change.
Right. It continues. So then we take ourselves out of alignment, and all of a sudden we encounter obstacles that are, common in the human experience. And so we start to stamp our feet. My things are not working out. Wait a minute, they're working out. But when your alignment to the creative force is negotiable, then the other things that are working out become intermittent. They're not precise. They're not on time. They're not exact. Now all of a sudden you start to develop obstacles.
Truly, when you completely surrender, that's when it works the most. But that's the hardest to do, to completely surrender. We were talking about it. There's a beautiful portion in the Bible where it talks about Abraham having to sacrifice his only son. So he waited an entire life, 100 years, and all of a sudden he's given the blessing to have a son. The son is born, and then he's asked to sacrifice his only son. So I asked Vlad, I said, if you heard a voice that said you have to sacrifice Theo, what would you do? He said, forget about it. I couldn't do it. So I heard a beautiful story about how it wasn't a test. God wasn't testing Abraham because God's not a person. And obviously, if, let's say, we imagine God as a person, God knows anyway. So who really needs the test? The test was for Abraham himself to see how far his faith went, to where he said, I surrender completely. He truly surrendered to the point where he was willing to give up his son. We talked about the realized practical way about giving up his joy, right? Giving up his what he thought defined him. But in the physical material world, it was his son. It was everything to him. And he was willing to say, okay, whatever it takes.
So,
Because I'm completely with that I call God.
so the crash is we're kind of going through a crash review of all the things we covered, but it's kind of a reminder because I see that people struggle with these concepts and then they go back and forth with what's written in the Bible and how it's written. So the idea of him sacrificing his son was something just came up about names. Someone said, well, what does it mean? Why does a name mean something? Well, a name defines the intent. I don't know why my mother called me Vladimir, but it has two meanings: the ruler of the world or the bringer of peace. If you look at Vladimir Putin, he's a ruler, right? If you look at what's become of me as a result of my refinement, so hopefully I bring peace. I mean, that's my goal. So the idea is that the name defines the intent. And so Isaac was named joy or laughter. The real meaning, the underlying meaning is that you have to be willing to say, I'm not defined by the hours of the day. That's not how I make a living. When you're attached to your hours, then that's how you make a living. You're always in survival mode, right? I'm defined by, yes, my talents and my abilities, but there's a greater way to be able to make a living that's not as, you're not seeing people by the hour or 12 hours a day. So then if I'm attached to my way of making a living per hour, then in order for me to have a bigger audience, I have to be sustained by the creative force. But I also have to get out of my box and accept that once I let go of the hourly attachment, of the attachment to time, which I think defines my practice, then other possibilities show up, and they do. That's why I'm trying to make the concept applicable in everyday life. So, for instance, Sarah, we know about your husband's story, right? So he refined himself and he's doing exactly what he loves. And he had steps. He had to go and elevate from management and serving tables and so on and so on and so on. And he got what he wanted. Why? Because he was willing to take on, he's one of the few young men I know that was willing to take on something, new concept, and stick to it. And it gave him a broader audience because he wasn't defined by his attachment to what he thought he was. Moving forward,
I think now that you mentioned him, he really, and he still is, they both are, applying the concept of surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
They really are working hard on surrendering. So now they themselves are experiencing a new reality. Mm-hmm. And it's hard. It's scary because when you think about surrendering, you think about, okay, I have to kind of let go of everything. And it's hard to let go of everything because we're so comfortable and used to whatever it is that we like around.
Even our relationships to our family, we think we're defined by them. And we're not. I think I'm defined, I had a mentor and a relative, a family member who, if I needed to sneeze, I would call him and ask him if it was okay in my 30s. And then I realized if I continue to call, I'm not becoming my own person. And so I started to, certain things were introduced to me and they say, oh, well, these are your limitations. No, that's not a limitation. What do you mean? Oh, you have smaller lungs. No, I don't. I can run as much as I want as long as I push myself beyond my comfort level. I can train as hard as I want. I can develop my lungs. I can restructure my shape, the shape of my face. I'm not confined by someone else's depiction or perception of me. I choose that as long as I have a relationship with the Creator and it doesn't define me. And I'm willing to not be attached to being a Pisces, being a nervous cast, a bilious lip, and whatever else is structure, or be diagnosed by anything. So then, all of us have the ability to restructure because the only thing that's constant is change.
I was listening to somebody say, it's our belief that really allows us to move forward, but it also limits us. And if you really wanted and you believed in it, you could walk through a wall. Truly, you could walk through walls, but we believe that we can't, so we can't.
It's
I mean, don't judge it, but
I can tell you this. Look. My dear Uncle Peter, who taught me a tremendous amount, he's a huge support system and inspired me to be who I am today. I give him a lot of credit. But he teaches morphology. It's an incredible study of facial features. But what it does is it gives preconceived notions. So if I look at a picture of someone and then I meet them for business or for a session, based on that structure, I already have a preconceived notion about who they are. But the truth is, I can choose my relationship instead of preparing myself for one. I can choose a relationship with a person that may or may not be facially compatible with me or may not have the patience to listen to me. Because I choose what it is that I want from them, then they become what it is that I've chosen. It's all over the Bible. Every story has that possibility. Yeah, he just clicked on. He must have heard me talking about it. So the idea is the only thing that's constant is change. You're not confined by anything. You're not confined by your structure, by your body type, by your face type, by your astrology, by your sign, by nothing. If you have the will, you can, and you're willing to set aside the diagnosis or your type, then you allow God in, which is a mutable, constantly evolving energetic force that sustains absolutely everything. And then it restructures who you are, as long as you're willing to make space for it. If you don't have space for it and you're confined within the confines of a structure that doesn't allow for change, well, then you're doomed. Then you might as well be diagnosed. What was the next thing we were going to discuss about this week's portion? You mentioned the angel, and you mentioned
last week and this week we talked about Lot's wife looking back.
Mm-hmm.
And so how all these stories, throughout all these stories, were constantly being showed how to move forward and not look back and not live in our regrets and our old behavior and an outdated structure or framework that we have been used to. So the story says that Lot's wife looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. So what's that mean?
So the structure, if I'm with you here in class, and I'm thinking about tomorrow, then in my imagination, which actually creates my reality or fuels my reality, if I live in alignment or an observance of a structured either religion or a way, that way sustains my soul, and the constant commitment to a way or to a structure sustains my soul and gives me the ability to imagine more every day and have my imagination plus my adding with my conviction and my goals, structure the outcome that I truly desire. And it unfolds, right? So if I'm living in lack, or I'm living in a survival mode that I've gotten used to, or if I'm living in replaying and saying, I can't really go to New York City, this is what's going to happen to me. Why? Because that's what's happened to me in the past. Well, then I'm dragging my past into the future and constantly replaying the past. More importantly, I cannot imagine a new future or a possibility. So what that causes is a shutdown of a flow. The flow narrows. So if you think about a funnel, then you're insinuating that it comes from somewhere above. It doesn't. It's right here with us. So that it comes from the world that's right here with us. As long as I'm in alignment through ritual with it, then it fuels me constantly so that I can fill out the shape that I'm in. So Vladimir chose to be a healer, right? And whatever else my profession or my job does. And so in order for me to be the best of that, I have to allow myself to be in what is and not try to condition my outcomes or use my imagination to be stuck in what was, or drag possibilities or lack thereof into a future, which will then hinder me from becoming the shape that I'm in. What is the shape that I'm in? My reality, my face, my body, my structure, everything speaks. My eyes, everything speaks and expresses itself into the human experience and says, this is Vladimir and this is what he is. I fill out the shape that I'm in. In order for me to be effective in the shape that I'm in, I have to fuel that shape. Well, imagining the past doesn't allow me to fully receive. It's almost like plugging your iPhone into a charger halfway. So then the apps don't work. So if you want your apps, your eyes, your mouth, your ears, your brain, if you have one, your your heart, if you want these apps to work, you have to stop the not just imagining the past, but you have to stop robbing yourself of the newer possibility, because the past doesn't create the future, the now does. And this moment creates the next moment, and so on. That's, I think, in a nutshell, as our friends would say, um, the idea behind imagining or using your imagination or being or living in the past.
What about the concept of looking back? I've heard you explain this to people. And what does it mean that she turned to salt? She turned into a rock. She turned into salt. What does that mean for us?
So
when we live in regret, what happens?
The first idea I've ever gotten was from Jerry Epstein, my uncle's teacher. She'd bear on the screen at the bottom. He insinuated that she didn't turn to salt. There was no medical explanation to what happened to her, and she scleroted from inside. But if you think about it in a practical way, that which sustains your soul is energy. So if you're out of alignment from the flow, what happens? Your cells lose fluidity. They become hard. So you atrophy from internally, whether it's stenosis of the spine, arterial sclerosis, osteoporosis, anything that has to do with sclerosis has to do with looking back or dragging the past with you into the future.
So you harden from the inside because you don't allow the flow of energy to go through you, or you don't allow yourself to receive energy.
You're not present long enough to be able to be fueled by that which sustains you. Well, if you're constantly living within the confines of a structure that sustains you, the moment you deviate, like we did last weekend,
we didn't
really deviate. No, but we had a plan.
Yeah, we planned it, but never.
We never executed,
Right.
but it already reacted to it. It doesn't mean that we atrophied, but it does mean that we came down to a lower reality that is more likely to have obstacles that are harder. Even that insinuates hardened, right? So if you're not in alignment and you deviate in your mind and you slightly unplug yourself, it's not a punishment. But what happens is you lower your vibration and all of a sudden you encounter obstacles. Well, the same with the body. If the body is not constantly receiving the sustaining flow, then you become more dense. It's it's actually the cause of weight gaining weight, obesity, because what happens is the individual doesn't resolve anything in their heart and their mind. So every scenario in their lives is happenstance, and they, as Mr. Resnick would say, they hold on. Right? Holding on is not just unhealthy. What happens is they hold on to it in their hearts and in their minds, and there's no resolve. If there's no resolve, there's no room for God's energy to enter their minds and their hearts, which means they atrophy and they, whatever scenario they think has happened to them, whatever happenstance happened to them, if they don't take responsibility for co-creating it, so they didn't come to an understanding of what happened. Something else is to blame. So every time something else is to blame, then there's really never resolve. They never take responsibility for anything. They're nice and everybody else is toxic, and so there's no room for the creator's energy to enter the heart and the mind. The cells of the body harden and they grow sideways, horizontally, not vertically. And that's how people gain weight.
How do you recognize the moment when you slightly unplug? So you're in alignment, and then all of a sudden you either have a thought or you go through some action and you unplug from this flow. How do you have the capacity to recognize that moment?
It's a momentary. It's a moment to moment thing. You have to really train yourself. I guess I trained myself through becoming realized and having all of these scenarios happen. Um, I don't think it took me years to understand it, but it's if you're willing to look at the world around you as an expression of the inner you, it's not a mirror, it's not the law of attraction, it's the law of creation. So then if you look at the world around you and you're willing, and I was willing to look at the young man's incident and his unwillingness to keep his deal, I made a deal with the creator. I'm in alignment, right? And my deal is that I observe this way, and this is what I do to gather the wires that distract me in the human experience from being in alignment. And all of a sudden, because I thought everything was okay and chilly willy, I'm going to make different plans. Well, no, it's not as if the hand of God came down and keeps me back in center or back to center or calls me back somehow. No, it, in spite of me being in the flow and my willingness to recognize that the young man's behavior is an expression of what I did to myself. So really, he's giving me a guideline. For those of you that missed, um, I'm not going to retell the story, but it's a realized way of looking at reality. It's not a mirror. Nobody's mirroring anything. It's an expression of who you internally are. That's how we started this class. Our first class was the intro was about my experience with Moses, who explained to me that everything is an expression, not a mirror. And so it's an expression of the inner you. So if you understand that, then you're able in the moment, as Maria just asked, to recognize, then wait a minute, the kid just betrayed me. He made a deal with me, and all of a sudden he backpedaled because he decided to. Well, it's not like that. You can't just decide you made a deal with someone. You engage them in the process, and then you all of a sudden you changed your mind because someone else gave them advice to take it easy or be scared. So what happens is I deviated from my alignment. I made a choice in the moment to sacrifice my alignment for what I think is fun.
But you gotta be willing to recognize in that moment that you consciously recognize that your actions have an impact, and then your thoughts and your belief in the moment is what it's creating everything around you. It can't be convenient.
Right. It's not Burger King.
That's the trick, that it cannot be convenient, and you have to kind of get honest with yourself.
Court. I mean, Kels, what's Burger King? What can you get at Burger King? Can't hear you.
You can get absolutely nothing because you can't have it your way.
You can go to Burger King and have it your way. It's a negotiation. Everyone has it. Everyone subscribe to it. I want to move forward because there's a part of this portion. I hope we're clear, and Maria, I hope we answered your question. But there's a portion that's really interesting about seeing an angel and what causes that. And if I wanted to address it and comment that it is for everyone. I accused many of these frou-frou practitioners that say they speak to angels. Well, I didn't subscribe to it until I actually had my own experience with two significant ones. One was with Raphael, who told me the way that I would change the way the medical community looks at healing, and the other one was with Uriel. I was meditating, and I saw a huge hand of light reach into my chest, and it was painful. It was so painful I doubled over and like leaned forward in my chair. And when it was over, I asked it what it was, and he said, "I'm Uriel." So I called a friend of mine who's a clergy in New York, and I asked him, I said, "What's Uriel? Do you know?" He said, "Uriel is the hand of God." I never said anything to him about the hand. So that was my confirmation. But the reason I brought it up because it's a very real experience. Angelic beings exist. You don't have to call on them. But as soon as my wife is done dying, we'll talk about that.
Oh, they can't hear me coughing.
Oh. So I have to tell you that even though angels are super light beings that have never been in the human experience, I've encountered some that are human. And if you allow them, they will enter your lives at the most appropriate time. So the Bible speaks about many angels. An angel came to Moses, to Abraham. An angel came to Hagar, right? Gabriel, right? Came to Hagar.
I don't know the name of it.
So there are a lot of several angels. There are stories about angels in the Bible, and I can tell you that aside from those are real experiences, and expecting them is kind of presumptuous, but you can have those experiences, and they are very real. Are they always necessarily otherworldly beings? No. Sometimes they come in human form, and they change the course of your life. And since we're interpreting the Bible in a practical way, that was my intent to bring that up. This is Hagar had seen, or she spoke to God in the desert. Right. She was going to leave the baby, right?
Angels, messengers, not directly from God, but the angels came and told her not to leave and to come back.
Right. And so she didn't leave the baby, and God said he was going to make him a prophet. Prophet of what, I have no idea, but they created the adversary that's constantly refining us. There were other stories that we wanted to address. Remember?
We have touched on most of them.
Yeah. Any questions? Go. No, no Raga.
I have a question. So when you're talking about, so we're talking about not looking back,
Mhm.
and then you also talk about being present enough so that you are connected to the flow and you're able to co-create effectively.
Mhm.
But then also your imagination becomes bigger the more connected you are, right? So if you are thinking or constantly imagining a different positive but different life for yourself, different future for yourself, but then that also means you're not in the moment,
Right.
right? So,
All of these, Sarah, I'll comment as we go. I'm, if I may comment on this portion of your question.
yeah, of course.
In the process, all these life hacks and all this wellness stuff that's out there, imagine yourself a billionaire. I identify as a billionaire, but I'm not one. So,
But you identify so much that you become one.
well, yeah,
That's the whole
I've
idea.
been identifying for the last 26 years. It ain't happened. Something's wrong with this woke system. So,
You're not identifying strong enough.
no, I think I
No.
identify as a large black man, and maybe that'll work for me. So look, I sitting around imagining it so is also a complete waste of time. It's also
Yeah.
peering into the unseen and trying to
Hmm.
maneuver it for your benefit, which is idolatry.
But wouldn't you say it's okay to think about it, to imagine it, but not worry about how it's gonna happen, but on the contrary, just allow it to unfold. It's okay to want
Yeah.
something, but you gotta allow it to unfold because it's not up to you. And if it were up to you, you'd probably get
So
some,
look,
I don't know,
if we look at it,
little portion.
if you've seen kids blow bubbles of soap bubbles, right?
Hmm.
Think about it that way, if you can imagine that. Now, once you have a plan, if you and I wanted to build a house, we'd invite a designer and a architect, and we'd make a blueprint. Right? And that blueprint now is a potential of what can be. But in order for that to happen, you have to take action. You have to get a general contractor. You have to get money. In the process, you can react. The contractor is unreliable. The bank doesn't want to approve your mortgage, and there's all kinds of obstacles in the process, right? So once you have a blueprint, then point B already exists. Now it's a question of how you get to point B from point A. You can create a drama and constantly create obstacles that conspire against everyone in the process and say, well, it's not going to turn out because, these Cuban contractors, they're never on time. Is that any of that true? No. So then, our where's the formula? The formula is it really is important to write down your plan because then you get it out of your head and you can stop contemplating the details. You can actually write out the plan on paper and give yourself some peace. Even if it's something you want to say to another person, if you sit down and write it in a letter, once it's written, you're at peace because you've said what you wanted to say, right? So it applies the same for a plan or a business or a structure of some sort, or a house that you want to live in. Now you have to it's not going to magically fall out of the sky. There could be some magic to it and some miracles that unfold in the way you make a living. So, for instance, we talked about the attachment to hours, right? And all of a sudden, someone calls and says, "Hey, Sarah, can you come to Argentina and see 100 people? They want your husband to make music for an event for a soccer game." You understand? That's the magic of alignment.
Yeah, but that's part of allowing her imagination. Like, if you want to work on your imagination, you allow your imagination to go, but you don't worry about how.
Right. So
That's the surrendering part.
That's what I was gonna get to.
you
So then you
surrender
surrender.
to
Mm-hmm.
the flow through your observance and your ritual
Mm-hmm.
without your attachment to what may or may not be, because now you're conditioning the outcome, limiting the possibility by you're constantly imagining, I want 5 bedrooms in my house. It's not going to happen. How do you
Yeah.
know? You may go and your husband will write music for the soccer game for FIFA, and you'll get a 7-bedroom house. So now you've limited the possibility of unlimited possibilities. God is
Yeah.
unlimited, right? So then, as long as you're willing to be a vehicle and you're sustained by your structure, whatever it may be, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, whatever it is that you do and practice, as long as you're practicing and you can move your attachment and your ideas out of the way, and you have clarity about what it is that you're working towards. God helps those who help themselves. It ain't going to happen by itself.
Yeah, because it's you who has to participate in the process. It's not, you can't just sit and wait for God to do. You have to do your part. But then you also at the same time have to understand the concept of surrendering and allow it to just unfold in front of your eyes.
So now in our healing practice, aside from doing these classes, we run a healing practice. I've been in it for 26 years. My wife's been in it for the last 6 years. We have 2 models. No one is coming to the rescue, and you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. And if you're willing to do that, then you can achieve what you want. There's tons of people sitting around using creative imagination as a complete waste of time. Complete. It doesn't mean anything. And it doesn't mean anything that it doesn't mean anything. Because if it meant something, it would have achieved something. But it achieves maybe one out of 100. But if you're in alignment and you have a complete life of immersion into a sustaining practice that requires you to be precise, well, then your results are precise. If you can move your attachment out of the way, you don't have to be. If you want to, when I want to heal someone's blood clot, I don't think of myself going into a tunnel and cleaning the tunnel. I literally use surgical tools as if I'm the surgeon. If I want to, my mother asked me to talk about this, so I'm going to do it. If I want to help her with her eye or something, she has some issue, which may or may not exist, but I tell her, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to treat you. Whether it exists or not is not relevant. What's relevant is how you use your imagination. It doesn't have to be in a creative way. It could be in a literal way. But I cannot be attached to her being well. She'll be well if she chooses to be well. And she has to understand how she made herself unwell so that she can make her correction and do her part. It's the same with any goal, any work goal, any home goal.
So you say when you treat someone, you're not attached to the outcome of what you want for them.
Nope.
You instead allow the energy, the healing energy to come through and do
because
for
it's
them.
unlimited. God's unlimited. The moment I say I'm doing it, or I'm attached to her being well, or I know what she has, and because I have a need to be right, I can help her. I don't do anything. I'm just doing magic. I sit and I literally unscrew her eye and unscrew it and pull things out of there that are real. And then what happens is it provides for me based on the language that I understand. So it's being in alignment and having a plan. Getting back to your question, is a while.
Thanks.
So as long as you have a plan and it's clear and it's written and you're not attached to how it may or may not unfold, you immerse yourself in the movement forward. If you remember what was the Matrix? You remember Lawrence Fishburne? As he moves forward, the tiles come under his feet. That's how it works. As long as you're moving forward, it provides for you. It just gives you the tiles and the steps. And so once you start moving forward, it starts to unfold and you're provided with the people that can accommodate you. the proper GCs to build your house, the proper people that may or may not build your business. Anything, whatever it is, whatever you're pursuing, whether it's a goal at work or a goal at home or some achievement in your relationship, it provides. As long as you're in alignment and you're not trying to lasso your new car in your creative imagination. There's somebody out there. Just lasso it in with a golden lasso. What are you talking about? I want a California Ferrari. I'm going to lasso it into my imagination. Come to me. No, I would like a vehicle, a new vehicle that fits my needs. I'm not attached to the way it looks or how it's, that it should be a California Ferrari one day. It doesn't define me. And then all of a sudden, I go to the gym, and the guy strikes up a conversation with me. At the end of the conversation, I said, "What's your field of expertise?" "Oh, I own a couple of car lots." Did somebody just hear me say that? It's how it's unfolds. It doesn't just unfold for me. It's there for you as well. I don't have an exclusive on anything, and I don't have a certificate on my wall that says I'm some wellness coach and that it can only happen for me. It can happen for all of you, and it exists for all of you. And as long as you look at the Bible that way as a guideline, and you look deeper and stop claiming that God is somehow angry, wants to destroy you or punish you, you'll always have the right story. So the goal, our original goal, was to give it a realized perspective, meaning how can I use it in a practical way and help it benefit me, and not some obscure story that I may or may not believe.
Kelsey had a question.
What's up, Kelly? You had a question or you forgot about
No, no, no. Why is it so hard to stay consistent?
Because you're lazy.
No.
Consistency is the key, but it is the most challenging.
You're not lazy when it comes to horses, right? We can give you 15 acres of horses and everybody would be taken care of. You'd stay up nights taking care of them and washing them and nursing them and doing.
I have been the last.
So then consistency, I became consistent when I realized that I like that working out, training makes me look better and feel better. In spite of my laziness, I can tell you that that's how I developed consistency. I can't live without the gym. I know that's my medicine. I can't live without breathing or praying. It's my medicine. If I don't take that, I'm going to take some other shit. So it's not okay for me. So I'm clear about what my medicine is. So if I don't go to the gym or I don't pray, so I kind of scare myself into submission because I'm a deviant. I will take something else to get me, not to feel or to get me out of my mind. I don't want to do that. I like feeling good. So if that becomes important and you become important to you, I think that's the issue. When you become important and valuable enough to yourself, then there's no negotiation. The problem is people negotiate. Well, I don't really need to get up at 6. I can work out at 7.
No, but I think the difficulty comes of being consistent with things that are not so tangible. Because with things that are tangible, that we see results in the moment, tangible results, it's easier to stay consistent. But with breathing, with praying, you don't see, you can't touch it per se. So it's harder to stay consistent that way. But what you don't see is that what you're really building is your energy body, your soul. It's not your physical body. Yes, in turn, your physical body benefits because it's the soul that moves us and that guides this physical body. But it's the soul that's being truly fueled. And the consistent part of fueling the soul is the hardest because you don't see it unless you're extremely sensitive and plugged in. But that's what matters the most, really. But you gotta make a
You have to
You have
become
to choose it.
valuable. You have to develop a sense of urgency for yourself, Kels. If your urgency, I know a lot of practitioners, even trainers, some of the best ones, they roll out of bed because they have to go treat people or train people. That's not a sense of urgency. That's a sense of urgency based on what you have to do for someone else. Your sense of urgency for yourself has to be the fact that you value you and you jump out of bed because you have to go fuel yourself and take care of you first before you take care of anybody else. You can't show anybody how to work out if you don't work out yourself. You can't build an audience in yoga if you're not doing yoga yourself. You can't talk about something that you're not. It doesn't work. Yes, Ema Joyce.
Mm-hmm. How would you help a woman who you work with without imagery exercises if, as a child, she went through trauma?
This isn't a healing class, but I'll comment on it.
How do you approach that? She's successful, everything, but the past is hurting.
Everybody knows it's my mother, right? So I don't subscribe to trauma. So I really don't want to talk about it, honestly, only because it's a Bible class and not a healing class. So I'm not, if you want, I'll call you and I'll absolutely help. But it's not appropriate to take this time.
Okay.
Anybody else going once? Go, Kels.
Just as a follow-up, can you think of the laziest person in the Bible to read
Noah.
the stories of?
Noah.
Okay.
He's accused of being completely irresponsible.
But he wasn't lazy. He built an ark.
Yeah,
you know what it takes to build an ark?
No, I never built one. But look, he was accused of being a drunk. He got drunk and didn't deliver the message to people. He could have saved a lot more people. So there are a couple of sects in my community that accuse him of being irresponsible.
But he was responsible.
Yes.
He wasn't supposed to save all these people.
If you don't believe in happenstance, or he could have, or he should have, then I should be on a New York City train offering my healing services to random people that are sitting on the train. I'd be in a building drooling out of the side of my mouth from on medication if that were true, right? So I don't believe that it's true that Noah was lazy, but he was accused of that. He was accused of being indifferent, and that if he had more responsibility and a sense of urgency, he would have saved a lot more people, or he would have done something different. Something would have been different. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, but didn't. It worked out perfect because the world needed to be wiped out. He brought renewal, right? So why do you ask about a person that's lazy? You want to be able to be like them?
No, I wanted to see how they resolved it, how that facet of the Bible was resolved.
Fine.
Imagine you were told that you have to breathe for an hour every day to save 10 of your horses who are sick.
You would do it.
Would you do it?
I know you would do it.
You would do it for them.
Sure.
So you have to become that important.
You have to become a horse.
Kel, so you think about it. How does self-value develop? At some point in 2009, I collapsed. I went to Maryland. I saw 240 people in 10 days. I came home and collapsed. I couldn't move. I couldn't lift my arms. I couldn't take a phone call. I couldn't do anything. And I went across the street to pray. And I had an experience with one of the masters in my community. I said, I think it was 2008, actually. He said, I don't know what to do. My child support is astronomical. I don't have a client base here. No one knows me here. And I'm exhausted. I couldn't do anything. He said, if you want a bigger audience, you have to have a bigger energy. More importantly, you have to attend to yourself. You have to make yourself important. And so I guess my motivating factor was, I don't have a choice. I got kids. I have to pay bills. I have to support them. If you don't have those kind of responsibilities, your horses are your driving force. But in order to help them and be effective, I can't help you if I don't help myself. If I'm down in the dumps and depressed, all my words are empty. They come out of my mouth and fall on the floor. They don't have conviction. You can't convince me to listen to you because it's meaningless. You're just talking learned nonsense. But if I take care of me and I breathe and I pray, you can see the drive in my eyes and the conviction in my words. Then it starts to help. And so that becomes important to you. And the people or the animals that you serve benefit from that. You're the driving force. You're the light of your stage. If that's important to you, then fuel your light and be consistent.
Would you say it's okay to start doing it for something else, like in Kelsey's case, for her horses, while she develops discipline and consistency, and eventually becomes for herself, because she then sees the effect on her?
And some people say act as if until it becomes as if.
Like fake it till you make it?
Yeah, I guess. But I don't know how to fake it. So I really understood the importance of, I think it's 30 years old, actually. Until then, I did things if I wanted to do them. But I realized that if I do a bunch of pull-ups, I feel really strong. If I do an hour of breathing, I feel really focused. Well, I don't want to be on medication because that's where I would be, or on some illicit drugs. So if that's not a reality for me, then I have to use medicine that works for me. And yoga, exercise, training, meditation, prayer, that works for me. And that's important. Otherwise, I'm not who I say that I am. I'm like everybody else, just preaching to people to do things that I don't really do. So be the change you want to see in the world. Gandhi said that. That's it. Class number
10.
10. Thank you for coming and listening to us. Look, I have family members online. They're actually listening to me. Oh my God.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Maria. Say hi to
Bye,
Theo.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a nice week. Bye.
Hi.